The dawn was breaking over Charles de Gaulle Airport, casting a soft orange glow across the tarmac. Inside Terminal 2E, the air was crisp, quiet, and heavy with the hum of early morning travel. Ibrahim Traore stood near Gate 42, his posture relaxed, his presence unassuming. No suit, no entourage, no ostentatious accessories. To the casual observer, he was just another traveler, perhaps a student or a young professional heading home. But Ibrahim Traore was no ordinary man. He was the president of Burkina Faso, a leader who chose humility over spectacle, who walked among his people without fanfare. He had just concluded a series of high-stakes meetings in Brussels, discussing trade agreements, mineral rights, and the future of African self-reliance. Now all he wanted was to return to Ouagadougou, to the red earth and vibrant pulse of his homeland. He approached the boarding gate for the Air Burkina flight, offering a quiet bonjour to a janitor sweeping nearby. The man nodded back, oblivious to the significance of the encounter. That was how Traore preferred it, unseen, grounded, one with the crowd. He boarded the plane, greeted the crew with a polite nod, and settled into his business class seat, 3B by the aisle. His only companion was a small notebook where he jotted thoughts on governance and progress. The cabin filled slowly, passengers stowing bags and adjusting seats. Traore blended in, his dark jacket and simple cap drawing no attention. Or so he thought. A few rows back, a storm was brewing. A wealthy Belgian investor, Mark Vanden, a man accustomed to private jets and preferential treatment, was also on the flight. He was headed to Burkina Faso to negotiate a lucrative mining deal. Vanden was used to being catered to. First-class lounges, priority boarding, the works. But today, a glitch in the system had landed him in business class, and he was furious. His assistants hovered nervously as he berated the gate staff, his voice carrying through the terminal. "Do you know who I am? I'm a key stakeholder in your country's economy," he snapped. The staff apologized profusely, promising to resolve the issue. Enter Sophie, the lead flight attendant. A seasoned professional with a sharp uniform and sharper demeanor, she strode onto the plane with a mission. Her eyes swept the cabin, searching for a solution to appease the irate VIP. They landed on Traore, seated calmly, scrolling through his phone. No flashy watch, no assistance, just a man in a jacket. She pursed her lips, her assumptions already forming. Leaning toward a junior crew member, she whispered, "He doesn't look like he belongs here." Sophie approached Traore, her smile tight and rehearsed. "Monsieur, may I see your boarding pass, please?" Traore looked up, his expression neutral, and handed it over. She studied it, then glanced at him again. The seat was correct, but something in her mind refused to accept it. "Sir," she said, her tone clipped, "we may need to reassign your seat to accommodate another passenger. Would you mind moving to economy? We'll offer compensation." Traore tilted his head slightly. "Why me?" he asked, his voice steady, almost soft. Sophie faltered but pressed on. "It's just a routine adjustment, sir, for operational reasons." "Operational reasons," Traore repeated, his eyes locking onto hers. "And why am I the only one being asked?" The cabin grew quieter. A few passengers turned their heads, sensing the shift in tone. Sophie's smile wavered. "Sir, please, it's just a request." "No," Traore said simply, leaning back in his seat. "I'll stay." Sophie's face tightened. She wasn't used to defiance, especially not from someone she'd already judged. She turned on her heel, her heels clicking as she marched to the front of the plane. The tension was palpable now, a silent current running through the cabin. A young woman in a nearby seat, a Burkina student returning from Paris, watched closely, her eyes narrowing. She recognized Traore immediately but said nothing. Sophie returned, this time targeting another passenger, a West African man in a neatly pressed shirt, seated in 4C. "Sir, we need your seat," she said curtly, barely glancing at his boarding pass. The man looked confused. "Why me? I paid for this seat." Traore's gaze sharpened. He stood, his presence suddenly commanding. "Enough," he said, his voice low but resonant. "You're not choosing based on tickets. You're choosing based on appearance. That's discrimination." Sophie froze, her clipboard trembling slightly in her hand. "Sir, please sit down. You're causing a disturbance." "Am I?" Traore asked, his calm unshaken. "Or are you?" The cabin was now a stage, every eye on the confrontation. Vanden, the Belgian investor, was finally escorted on board, his face smug as Sophie greeted him with exaggerated warmth. "Monsieur Vanden, we've arranged everything," she said, offering him a glass of sparkling water. He took Traore's seat without a second glance, oblivious to the man he'd displaced. The plane took off, climbing into the pale morning sky. Traore, now in an economy seat after a quiet compromise to avoid further escalation, sat silently, his notebook open. He didn't complain or demand attention. He simply watched, his mind as sharp as ever. Sophie avoided him, her confidence shaken by his unyielding composure. Vanden, meanwhile, was treated like royalty. Extra pillows, a warm towel, Sophie's laughter at his every word. "Burkina Faso needs men like me," he boasted loudly. "Without our investments, where would they be?" A Burkinabe businessman seated nearby overheard and clenched his jaw. He leaned toward the student who had recognized Traore earlier. "That's our president they're disrespecting," he whispered. Her eyes widened, but she nodded, understanding the need for silence. The flight continued, the cabin settling into a fragile calm. Sophie offered Traore a drink mid-flight, her voice strained. "Water, sir?" He nodded, saying nothing. No apology came, no acknowledgement of the insult. The plane began its descent into Ouagadougou, the landscape below a tapestry of red soil and green fields. Passengers stirred, fastening seatbelts, but outside something extraordinary was unfolding. On the tarmac, a convoy of sleek black vehicles lined up, flanked by presidential guards in crisp uniforms. The Minister of Interior, the head of the armed forces, and a cadre of officials stood in formation, their faces solemn. A crowd gathered beyond the perimeter, flags waving, anticipation electric in the air. As the plane taxied to a stop, Sophie prepared to escort Vanden off first, assuming the display was for him. He adjusted his tie, smirking. "See? They know who matters." But before the doors opened, a tall officer in a green beret boarded, his boots echoing with authority. He strode past Vanden, past Sophie, and stopped at Traore's seat in economy. With a crisp salute, he said, "Monsieur le Président, welcome home." The cabin fell silent, the air thick with shock. Sophie's face drained of color, her clipboard slipping from her hands. Vanden's jaw dropped, his arrogance crumbling. "President?" he stammered. Traore stood, his dignity unshaken, and walked toward the exit. The officer turned to Sophie and Vanden. "You two, come with us," he said, his tone icy. "You are detained for disrespecting the head of state." Sophie's voice trembled. "This is a mistake. I didn't know." "You didn't need to know," the officer replied. "You needed to respect." Traore stepped onto the tarmac, greeted by his ministers and a roaring crowd. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment. Sophie and Vanden were led away, their heads bowed, their privilege shattered. News spread like wildfire. Headlines screamed of the flight of justice. Social media erupted with number "Respect Burkina," and African voices celebrated a leader who walked humbly but stood tall. At the presidential palace, Traore resumed his work, building schools, strengthening borders, empowering his people. He never spoke of the incident again, but the story became legend. A quiet man in economy, a flight attendant's prejudice, an investor's hubris in a landing that reminded the world. Burkina Faso bows to no one.